Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to a new episode of Social Confoes. I'm your host Diego, together with my co-host Sean-Luc. Sean-Luc, we are back. It's gonna be an exciting episode. What are we up today?
So, before we talk about what we're up to today, please don't forget to follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/confos, to follow us on Instagram at confos on Instagram, and last but definitely not least, subscribe to our newsletter at Substack. That's confos.substack.com. And don't forget, Confos is CONFOES. And with that being said, let's go to today's guest. Because today's guest is something that is someone who's truly special. If you look at her resume, she studied at Oxford, she studied at Yale, she has studied in multiple countries, is part of the Young Leaders of America's Initiative alumni, just like yourself, Diego, I think from a different year. And she is basically, I don't know if she can tell herself if she's born or raised an entrepreneur, but she has a very big CV for somebody of her age. And the funny thing is, that's not the introduction that I'm going to give her. The introduction that I'm going to give her is that a little over 25, yeah, I think 20 years ago, I was sitting at my high school, and it was my last year of high school, and she was in her second year, and we were having a chit chat, and one of her friends decided to join in, and that ended up being my girlfriend at the time. And I don't know if our guest of today remembers how that conversation went, but if it wasn't for her, I probably would have never even considered dating her friend. So I owe more to her than she thinks, but I have to thank her for one of her friends becoming my girlfriend, because at the time I wasn't really as good with the opposite sex at all. So thank you. Without further ado, Maya, welcome to Social Compose.
Hi.
So Maya,
Thanks for
wing woman
welcome.
at a young age. Tell us about that. Do you
I'm
remember that
actually
story?
no, I don't. And I'm actually a pretty good wing woman. I'm a big fan of love, so I'm always supportive of that.
But
All right.
growing up, we went to the same high school. Diego also went to. I think Diego was a couple of years after
You're
you
giving
went.
away my age, man.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's not that far apart. Like back then, it looked like a lot, but as you get older, it's very relative. What do you remember from your high school days, Maya? What was Maya like in high school?
Um, well, honestly, I think I had like a punk rock phase, and Blink 182, and Green Day, and Metallica, and just rock. And then all the black, but I didn't go as far as black nails, but I did have that little phase. And after that, I guess I was a pretty normal teenager, aside from you know stuff. But yeah, aside from what happened with my dad, pretty much fairly normal childhood. I was teacher's pet. um so I was always pretty much good with most of the teachers. I like to organize stuff, so I would usually, um, yeah, be in charge of like snoop poses, and I don't even know what you call that in English.
Yeah,
Uh,
the events, the high school events.
yeah, and I was pretty actively engaged, I think, and I used to always hang out with the older kids, so uh, fifth grade or sixth grade. Um, in our high school.
So I do want to ask you a question on that, because you mentioned that you were a teacher's pet. but if you were the punk rock, you were also kind of a rebel. So
Yeah.
how did you leverage between the being a rebel and using your teacher's pet to get out of situations that you brought yourself in as a rebel? Do you remember recall that?
Mm, honestly, no. I remember once I used humor a lot, and I think we had a teacher. Her name was Roger or Rogers, and we would make songs in the class and like rap, and then the whole class would start singing the song. And I don't know how we got out of that one, but I remember that she quit like shortly after. So I think that was a um yeah, I had some
Were you a
instinct
2A?
moments.
Were you in class 2A?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the class 2A has been notorious at our high school. If you're in 2A, you've heard some amazing stories from people getting expelled for hitting the teacher on the behind to um, all everybody in that class deciding that they were gonna fail a year to be together in the same classroom again next year. So it ranged. My favorite 2A story is lighting fireworks in the classroom.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Jesus.
So 2A was Diego in general, a pretty wild class to begin with.
Well, I was in the A classes before as well in the underbow, but I think I understand now why some things have changed when I went to that school because the teacher you mentioned, I've never heard of that teacher, uh, but
Yeah, she quit.
I gotta say we've had our fair share of things happen as well, and kind of the school changed rules and regulations as they went along, but I see some origins are in this call right now.
Whoa, whoa, we didn't say that though. We didn't say that. But
Mhm.
continue on a little bit further. In the end, everything that happened, you mentioned you had some personal stuff in your life as well. But at the end of the day, a lot of people in Suriname have to decide we have to go study. Like it's like almost from a young age, like instilled on us, like, hey, and you're gonna go and study. When you're done with high school, you have to study. And then there's several options that come up. You can stay in Suriname, what most of us don't do, especially at that high school. You can get a scholarship to the US and study in the US or study in the Netherlands. And basically, nowadays there are many more options, but back then those were kind of like the three only considered options. Do you remember the thought process that you went through to decide what you wanted to do with your life after high school?
Oh, actually, when I was, I think about 6 years old, I told my mom I was gonna go to Harvard. And back then, I wanted to be a corporate attorney. But later on in life, later on in life, when I was 16 and had to choose, I didn't want to choose law because I thought it would be boring and not challenging. So I actually, like in the last grade, um, I only attended primarily math classes, and I skipped most of the other classes. And then I got called to the I got called to the office by If Ends Better. And she's like, "Why aren't you going to the other classes?" And I'm like, "Yeah, my grades are good, right? Like, do I really have to?" And I think I actually told her that the teachers were boring and not very smart. Like something like that, but not all of them. I think a couple of two or three. I really, really, really didn't like the classes. So I was really like I don't know, pretty shit mouth teen, I think.
I see a lot
Uh,
of similarities, to be honest.
like
Yeah.
for like graduation assignments or
No,
one of
like
the
not going to. I actually also skipped math. I didn't even consider math, but I skipped because I was uh, uh, Neslo, who was the math teacher. he had
Oh
all
yeah.
these private tutoring classes at home. So
Hmm.
basically, I took tutoring classes because I skipped at school. And I was like, hey, that's a
Oh
fun way to, and then for me,
yeah.
it's different. I'm not sure if it's the same for you. For me, the problem was that the classes were too big. I couldn't concentrate in classes with 20 plus people, especially not if their learning temp rate was faster or slower compared to mine. So not necessarily always slower, but there was so much different learning tempos in the classroom that I was getting bored with it. And like you said, the teachers didn't have a way to keep me entertained or interested. So I basically skipped all classes the last year. Um, and I actually considered failing 3 subjects in order to get a higher score at the exam. As in, hey, I'm only going to study for these 4 or 5, and then I'm just going to purposely fail those two that I have three that I have a re-exam, and then I'm actually going to study for those three. And they got so upset with me, like the board, Jeff Ensberg and others got so upset that I was even considering and contemplating going for that. But I was like, but that way I have better grades because I only have to focus on three or
Yeah,
four options.
it's a tactical decision.
Yeah, but they weren't okay with it. But you wanted to originally wanted to go to Harvard. Did you end
Yeah.
up taking the SATs just to
Mm-mm.
see whether or
No.
not you wanted to go?
No, when I was 16, I decided that I wanted to study at econometrics and, you know, math. And so more math and technology. So I went to Erasmus actually. And Harvard was also, I thought, too expensive, and getting a full scholarship, even if you get a full scholarship, the costs are still a lot more expensive than the Netherlands. So I considered the Netherlands over um, Ivy.
Yeah, an
So
economical decision. And I think you in the Netherlands probably had a similar trajectory as Jean-Luc, but can you explain a bit about your experience there? Because did you spend your whole, post high school there, and when did you decide to um come back? Because there was a trigger event that kind of uh, decided that okay, maybe in the Netherlands isn't for you right now. So what kind of happened there and made you decide to pursue the road you're on now?
Well, I was in my second year, about to go into my third year. Um, and it wasn't going so well into like my mom's shop wasn't doing so well at the time, and like just expenses there were pretty high, and I felt responsible too. So I would work, like I would count cars and um, go and take like like statistics basically for like 10 hours, 12 hours a day, and I would do like side jobs. I was cleaning a woman's house who had multiple sclerosis. So all kinds of like side jobs just to help out around the house. And then at a certain point, my mom also got sick. Um, and then I just thought, you know what? I just want to spend time with her. And she also told me like she'd rather have like a healthy child than or a happy kid than some stressed out you know loon. Um, so she told me to come back, and I came back to Sue. I had a lot of I was really really homesick, like really homesick. Like I missed Sue, and I don't know. I didn't like it there. I had some bouts with racism at the university, which were really sucky, and I don't know. I prefer life in Suriname over life anywhere else, to be honest.
Yeah, you've been several places around the world. Like what is it about here that kind of really feels like home? What makes home for Maya?
Nature more than anything, but also the people, the pace of life. I feel like in developed countries or in the Western world, um, you're just a number. People don't work to live. They live to work basically. And um, here we just or we used to we
It
used
depends
to.
on how much you want to, like how ambitious you are. But even it's not really any accountability similar to the Western world. You still get to choose your own pace.
Yeah, and I mean, even with like in the Netherlands, for example, the distances, um, they're just it's like you have to make an appointment to see a friend. Whereas here, people can just walk in and you see most people like most of your friends every week. It's a lot more social. Friends and family are just closer, or I don't even think it's the distance. I think we just live in a different way with each other. Like we go out on the weekends or to like nature with groups. I don't see that happening anywhere else in the world very often.
So if you compare the Netherlands, studying in the Netherlands, you already mentioned the racism aspect, which I also dealt with. But if you compare studying in the Netherlands to studying in the US, and in this case Florida,
Yeah.
what are the big differences?
Well, I came back to Sue after Erasmus, and I actually went to FIR first. And then at a certain point, you had I think, this case in the Netherlands where a student bought a diploma. And then I felt like it had no value because I was only doing it because, my mom was like, yeah, you still need to finish uni. And I was like, ah, fine. Like, it's not like the piece of paper is really going to do anything for me, but sure. And then I did FIU online. So I didn't go to campus at FIU. So I didn't really experience that. I was also working here building Gray Mic at the time. When I came back, I immediately started with that. Picked it up again because I had started that company when I was 15. So when I was 16 and left, um, by the time I came back, I just picked it up and actually started building it out as a company. So I didn't want to go to a uni in another country, but I've always had a yeah. I can pretty easily like set my mind on something. I need to finish it and have the discipline to actually follow through. So then I finished that and basically didn't study anything like at a university after until Oxford. So I do most of my studying online.
Okay, hold on. Before we go into because she did end up actually having a business in the US. But before
Mhm.
we skip to that part, you mentioned something very important. You started Gray Mike at the age of 15.
Yeah.
Okay, can we quickly go back to uh, about
The
how
rebel,
you
rebel
decided
teen
the rebel teen
approach.
decided to start a business at 15, and also like the legal complications that come with it in Suriname, where
Well,
there is no teenage entrepreneurial structure. So how did you do that?
well, honestly, I just used my mom's credit card to buy stuff, like order stuff online, and there wasn't really anything available, so you could just order something on Amazon, and Amazon had just like, you know, gotten a pretty, yeah, not very very big as they are right now in the US, but it was just starting to be like the main
Yeah, that's
source of
becoming
shopping in the US.
mainstream. And
Yeah, it was heading into mainstream, and um I wanted to order a guitar. So I called VSH in Miami, who would do ocean shipping, and then I'd asked Kate if she would, pack a box for me and ship it. And that's basically how. Oh, sorry, no, not Kate, Jeannie, her mom. Actually, it's way earlier. And then she said yes, and other people would find out that I could do that, and then I started doing it for my friends. So it was primarily like a hobby, or started out as a hobby ish, just to make a couple of bucks on the side as a kid. And then it started growing and growing and growing and growing into weekly shipments. And then I would do air cargo. And that was after I was 18. And then when I could officially like start the company and incorporate everything, that's when we officially, signed up at the Chamber of Commerce. I got a business banking account, and it was actually with my mom. Like, she took me to the bank and introduced me to, the account manager that would, to this day, actually still. Well, I recently got a new business account manager, but um, he's been my account manager for almost 20 years, 21 years now.
I think that guidance is underappreciated, and I think your mom has been a really support system and in
Hmm.
guiding you and allowing you to do these things while you are
Yeah.
growing up and facilitating that environment. And I can see how that shaped you, giving you the ability to move how you want and basically nurturing that as you grow older. And on your point, John, look like the legal things, the complications, bank account. I think that doesn't really, maybe for some people, but at the end of the day, Maya found something to do to help herself first because you wanted something, and then other people see it, and that just naturally progresses into something, right? And it's up to you as an individual to decide, is this something or not? Because you found out there's demand. Because way back then there weren't many like you have now, these online shops you have every
Hmm.
corner. You have one right now. Everyone's taking freight forwarding orders for people, and credit cards are more accessible, so people can shop for themselves uh, online. But back then, I think you found a gold mine, and you are one of the few that could make that happen. And I do think it is very underestimated, like having that facilitation to open a bank account with your parents maybe can propel you several steps further. I was at an event on entrepreneurship a week or two ago, and it was always the same issue about banking accounts for businesses. But this is one solution at a young age. If you have kids, get them a bank account, guide them through that process. It's an easy solution that's not really systematic,
Yeah.
and go from
My
there.
mom taught me to save too. And she was always very supportive of everything that I wanted to do. I'm also very stubborn and hard-headed. So, like, if I pick a direction, or if I put something in my head and I'm gonna do it, I'm most likely going to end up end up at some point doing it. So it's just a matter of time for when I actually achieve it. So she was always supportive of that. She knew that I wanted to, go to Ivy League, so she supported that. Um, and basically, at a certain point, I think around the time that I started to travel for business too, um, then it was just like full on. I just do exactly whatever I think I need to do to move one step closer to the goal that I've set. And she just kind of supports me in that, whatever way possible.
So what sparked the Oxford goal? Like Harvard was the goal. Like you came back.
Uh, well,
What
actually,
sparked Oxford?
Harvard was my number one. Harvard, then Oxford, then Yale, then Princeton. So I had four
And can you
choices.
explain like what was the thought process? Why you chose to, because it was Ivy League, or like what was it about these schools, these institutions
Institutions.
that kind of
Well,
got you?
the quality of education, and the scientists and research and leadership that come out of these universities. And I feel like literally when I go to Oxford, for example, I literally feel like I'm at Hogwarts or Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Kids. I feel like alive, and understood. Um, and I don't know, there was just something that kept attracting me to those universities. And at a certain point, I was deep into Bitcoin or the space back then. I started pretty early on. Just friend told me about it, and then I looked into it, but it was still very very early stages. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep looking at this. And then when Wikipedia, WikiLeaks was taken down, and or not taken down. There's bank accounts were closed. I think it was their sources of funding. They actually integrated Bitcoin to accept donations on WikiLeaks, and then I knew this shit is gonna blow the fuck up. And that's when I was, I think, already in Whirlpool by then. And that's where everybody used to hang out, like Phil Potter from Bitfinex. You'd have Charlie Lee from Litecoin come in and talk about Bitcoin, and giving his shit posting and his comments. And it was mainly memes and shit posting and constant debates, like telling each other how big of a fucking idiot you are, and talking about trading and charts and price and Bitcoin and technology itself. And then in 2017, I think it was, yeah, 2017, I saw it come by on it. It was just it popped up, I think, in on my LinkedIn, um, that they had a blockchain course. So I decided to apply for the blockchain course. Then did that, but it didn't teach me anything that I didn't already know. So I wanted to, but I did enjoy the experience and like the quality of education, and especially diversity in course material, because you get a lot of different perspectives and different ways to look at things, and it changes your logic.
This was at
And
Oxford that you
that was
saw this.
Oxford. Yeah, that was Oxford. And then the year after, they had an Oxford fintech lab, and then I applied for that. And you had to write an essay, of course, elaborating why you'd be a good candidate, because I think there were about only 60 spots and about 13,000 students, or maybe at that time a little bit less, but it was a pretty small selection. And then I got accepted to the fintech lab, and that allowed me to physically go to Oxford, and study there, and that gives you alumni status. So that the goal of that fintech lab was basically, we'd get alumni status, we'd have the actual experience at Oxford, and coming out of this lab are different types of startups globally that are focused on certain innovations. So yeah, that's basically what brought me to Oxford, and it was, I think, one of the most yeah, I think I'll remember that those experience forever, because I really enjoy being stimulated at that level. It's the same reason I enjoy conferences, especially with Bitcoiners, because there's if there's any source on the world or place I really want to be, it is where I feel the most alive, and I feel the most alive in um that in one type of situation.
So, um, when you look at these top tier universities and programs, how much of the experience that you enjoy is the actual curriculum? How much is it the environment you are in? And how much of it is the network of the people that you're surrounded with?
Well, I think it's all parts equal. I mean, I enjoy the people. Um, I've been around other outliers or other, like my professor, for example. We've stayed in touch since I went to the fintech lab actually. Um, and most of the professors I can still reach out to, or still um, yeah, get any advice or anything on, or have a conversation with. So it's very stimulating. But I like actually, like in the Bitcoin space, for example, at conferences, I like those people more, or I click better personally, from as a rebel and a bit of a um yeah, stubborn type of individual. I click more, I feel like, with the tech nerds than with university, or Ivy League uni. Although I do tend to, um, I don't know, we have I've been talking to MIT a lot since last year, March, for example, and a lot of the faculty at MIT over the last year. And I don't know, I do have a good relationship with them, but like in the Bitcoin space, I feel more me. So, but it's you have other types of discussions um there too. It's more about politics, and more about um the wealth globally, and how wealth is shared, or at least those are most of the discussions I've had. Maybe you talk from anything ranging from global politics to global finances to market structures, market dynamics, um, and the pros of cons, of course, of the current financial system. So it's different types of conversations, but I find both mentally stimulating.
Is it the stimulation in the sense of like being, because I imagine just getting into an Ivy League school, you either have to be rich, have an entry point, or be an outlier to a certain degree in some sense, right? Because the
Um,
average,
in your in
uh,
your in your respective field, yeah.
right? And I feel like this culmination or meshing of outliers creates that stimulation and brings conversation to different levels
Hmm.
and cross pollinate in certain fields as well. Whereas
Hmm.
the more structured, the more grounded institutions kind of try to fit the mold in especially what Western society has shaped it to be to provide workers. So
Correct.
I
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how I'm seeing that, and how that rebel identity that you've kind of built up since you were younger um, reacts to that environment and gets that stimulation. I'm not trying to
Yeah. No.
psychoanalyze you right now, but I just
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
understand
It does feel like it, Diego. It does.
it.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, education at an Ivy League university is different. It's more interactive. I mean, they give presentations, but they're completely out of the box. It's not as cookie cutter as exactly what you're saying. Like Pink Floyd, brick in the wall, or another brick in the wall. They don't try to fit you into a specific box. You're a lot. It's more about logical thinking and reasoning, and stimulating debate. About innovation in particular, and research and science. So it's different people from different. Um, yeah, everybody's from different sectors, or different types of companies, and different stages of life. Um, so you do have like this cross pollination, or stimulation of and then bring about new ideas and theories as well. So it's yeah, it's not the same as a regular university, not even as Erasmus, for example. I it's it's worlds of difference, between like an Oxford, or MIT. Even MIT and Oxford are have their own differences, but also similar environments, and both are worlds apart from something like Erasmus. But Um, Erasmus University actually is also a very good university. Great professors. Like I love my calculus professor there. He also had a very great background, and it's just a different type of education. To be honest, it's a lot more supporting and coaching, training, and amplifying knowledge and logic than it is about you know
Well, the thing
knowing
about it
something.
is, the reason for it is actually quite simple. Because to get into these kind of Ivy League schools, you have to be at a certain level. So there's no more safeguarding whether or not somebody is an intellectual or has a certain skill level or a certain level of logical thinking. That's already stated by the entry point, being able to get in. And of course, there are like misfits and people that don't fit in and don't fit into those cultures of those schools, which eventually drop off. But in general, just getting accepted to a program in such a university kind of already, they've kind of pre selected you already, which I think allows a little bit more of a non conformative kind of structure that most universities have. So I think that's the reason why the pre-selection is so strict. But then comes the real issue that, or not the issue, I think biggest challenge, which I would see in your case is once you've experienced that and you've done the out of the box thinking and you have all these ideas and you come back to Suriname, how do you translate the Ivy level, league level thinking to a practical implementation in a country like ours?
Well, honestly, I came back and I tried to build the capital market here and innovate from here because I wanted to do that against the advice of my professors and um, yeah, I
Why
really
did they advise against it? I am curious.
Yeah, I would love to be a bit of a fly on the wall for that conversation, but give us a little, maybe a little bit of insight.
just from a practical perspective, because there's a reason why innovation doesn't happen in countries like ours. The environment isn't there yet. Um, but also like our country risk rating, our corruption ratings, and just the environment and ecosystem needed to as a startup, to get venture capital and funding and have the regulatory frameworks in place and have the country have an actual population of a much larger size and all the institutions in place and everything around you that you need is present in like a country like London. But um, we had a presentation from the chief compliance officer of Apple, Shefali Roy, and she and I got into a debate actually about Bitcoin. And she she actually said in her presentation one of the things um, that actually became true eventually was that innovation would be taking place in the next decade in the global south, in Africa and in Latin America. And that's where environments where you don't have legacy infrastructure, that is where you can truly innovate. So I can build things, or I get ideas here to build things that I wouldn't have if I were just in London. I'd have to think of the next big thing there, right? Here I can focus on, okay, um, what are the actual problems and how do solve these problems using new technology, um, without these legacy incumbents as you have them in these Western markets. Like what do you have here? The banks. That's about it, and they don't even function like banks should. Um, so it's and honestly to dumb things down. I try to as best as I can, but it usually ends up either in me having a frustrated face and most of the time you can read it on my face that I think that you're an idiot. So it's really hard to disguise that, but um, I try to, and it eventually at a certain point, after Robert got locked up, like that was, you can't really control something like that happening, that a central bank governor goes in, goes to jail, and that there's political games being played, or like the interests of certain people are, that you can't really change things like that in one fell swoop. So at a certain point in 2022, um, I decided to actually listen, and I started in Davos. So I went to WEF. They've been inviting me to go to WEF for like 2 years or 3 years. Yeah, 3 years already. Um, and in Davos, actually, we spend most of the time at the unconference. And David literally went around and told everybody at WEF that out of his 13,000 students, I was his top, the number one. So I'd have people in Davos, like like an heiress for Aker Group, the guy who invented Sonos, like different types of large companies, come up to me and actually tell me like, hey, David said I need to speak to you. You're top of his class out of 13,000 students globally. And then I was like, um, this feels better than Insu constantly having to battle people that think that they know things better when they haven't seen like half of the world, or actually know um enough to have like a well-informed opinion where you can actually debate me. So it's pretty frustrating actually to try and innovate in this environment. But um I get advice from one of my investors. um he told me, because I was getting sick, I lost a lot of weight, I was getting stressed out, um and I was always also like getting threats here, which was also like, what the fuck, but okay. And just people being untrustworthy to work with, like you can't really live, there's a lack of loyalty, it seems like, or business ethics, or integrity a lot. Like you lack a lot of fucking integrity here. And he took me under his wing. He told me, how much money do you need to keep your businesses afloat, and how much do you need to, actually just relax the fuck out, stop fighting an uphill struggle, build your sources, build your network, be aware of the fact that you're like one of the top 0.00001% of the world that actually has the technical understanding, the mental capacity to be able to do certain things. Like there's only a handful of people in the world that can do what you do. Appreciate that, bolster it, build your resources, build your network outside of Suriname, and go back when you're ready. And he said, don't even think about, because I kept hammering on like, oh, the exchange. We have to do the exchange now. We have to save the economy. We have to make sure that Suriname doesn't go to shit. And he's like, stop fighting, Maya. Like, just relax. Just build. He gave me an apartment in Davos. Um, and he has a villa in Monaco where I'm always welcome to visit. Um, and I have the apartment in Davos, which is very peaceful, 1,750 meters um, above sea level. It is the most expensive and highest city in Europe. It's where, Switzerland is where most financial innovation can thrive, especially as my field. Um, so I got rest and peace and quiet. And then I went to like 8 conferences back to back.
Diego, if I may, okay, there's a lot of things to unpack for, especially for the people listening on this. Like, what's WEF? What's WEF? Well, WEF is the World Economic Forum. Like, I'm just putting these things for the people that are listening or tuning in, that they have a better understanding or grasp when you kind of spit things that are for you the most daily and natural things to talk about, but for them, they need context. And I have one question, and then I'll let Diego in. And this is a difficult question because I get this questions a lot. And considering the infrastructure outside of Suriname, just considering the infrastructure, the field, the technical field that you are in, and the amount of innovation that's being done in the Western society versus in emerging markets, which you mentioned you need to be in those emerging markets to come up with new kind of innovations. And then again, opportunities that and resources and logistics and everything surrounding those innovative ideas that are not available in those emerging markets slash developing countries. Um, how hard is it to perform on a global scale but still decide to live in a developing country? And what's keeping you here?
Well, like for example, Switzerland is amazing. It is, I can go on endless road trips and have the most beautiful views in the world. I actually have the most beautiful view just looking out of my apartment, but um, it's not home, and my mom's here, and home is where my mom is. Um, so it's not Sue, and to me, I'd rather figure out a way to just innovate, which is what I did. Um, I figured out a way. Like I'm not incorporated in Sue. We had to incorporate in Bermuda, but it's on the same time zone, so it does make life easier. Um, and we're definitely working with a lot of institutions in, or are looking to work with institutions in Switzerland, and I'm definitely going to set up base there too. Um, but I can work from Sue. I mean, you have a computer, a camera, and or just a phone. Actually, you don't need much to stay in contact with the people you need to stay in contact with. So that makes life easier. But I do start to feel kind of like brain dead after the third month. Um, so I do try to go at least somewhere, once every quarter, um, and meet up just with like-minded people, other outliers in different fields, or whatever, like a conference in a week or a week and a half. I'm heading to El Salvador, for example. So it's I just try to get out, but there are also a lot of smart people here, who you have stimulating conversations with, but still, um, it sometimes it's just nice to be with the other outliers.
Yeah, it's you should at least once a year. But if you can do it quarterly, I think it's even better.
Mm,
Diego, go
quarterlies.
ahead.
No, I've been listening and I've seen how tired Maya can get, and I do appreciate, your mentor said you need to relax a bit and recharge. So I want to shift the conversation a bit. We've talked about the journey, we talked about the struggles, we talked about what you're busy with. So I'm curious to know, like, what is it about cars and Need for Speed that you find so fascinating and relaxing?
um I seriously, I don't know, I've just been obsessed with cars my entire life, I think. And I have a list of cars that I want, but I really have the discipline to not, you know, overspend, because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like some things are just wasted expenses.
Well, you're not going to
Um,
be able to drive them a lot here as well. So I think
here,
that's another
exactly. So
reason.
that is also a main issue, and I don't know. I just feel when I'm in sitting in the car, it feels like when I drive, I am one, or I become one with it. And so I do pick specific cars to drive with a specific handling or engine or acceleration. And then when I'm in the car, I feel like I'm one with it, and I can drive any car, but I when I drive a car that I like to drive, it just feels like I'm flying on the road. And I usually listen to music when I'm driving, and I have a particularly weird taste in music. Um, I mean, I like mainstream stuff too, but also like very weird songs here and there.
Test
And
us.
then yeah, and
Give
then
me
I'll
your
drive and I'll
favorite
sing.
Is
artist
there
to
an
drive with.
outlier experience that comes to mind?
AMG Winter Sport, yeah, Sweden. Yeah, that is winter sport is
Like
something
they drive on
completely.
ice, right? And
Yeah, you drift on ice.
you drift on ice. Like
Yeah, so Mercedes AMG, they test out their cars in Sweden, and it's very up. It's pretty much like really north in Sweden, Arjeplog, and then you have it was -36, I think, when I arrived. Um, and then they have a warehouse where they have a range of cars, the A45S, the uh, GT63S. Um, and the C63S. And then you drive those cars and you drive them on track and basically just learn how to drift on ice, on lakes. And I swear to God, it is the most beautiful experience ever. With those sunsets, the mountains in the backdrop, literally we were driving with two people in one car, Paul, and he was from Germany. His company had sent him out, AEG, I think, insurance company. And actually, because it's very mentally intense when you drive track, and especially drifting on ice, it's very you have to constantly concentrate, right? Which is why race car drivers, need to practice so much. And he actually I think he got sick and a headache after like the first 4 hours, and then he didn't want to drive anymore. So I was driving every day. And then like on the final day, we were driving until night. And then I didn't want to come off the track. Like everybody had already driven in and I was still on track. I was like, no, just another 30 minutes. And then I was still going out there. And when alone, you can like go all out. So, and then I hit it in the snow and I was towed. So I was towed the most actually from everyone that was there because I was going the fastest. And what happens is, so they come in and they pull you out with like this G wagon. Um, and then at the end of the whole thing, like you have the marketing team for AMG there, the marketing director, where you actually still talk to this day. Um, because I told them that their pickup trucks suck and their marketing sucked, and they needed a female driver for F1. And they gave me a golden tow hook. So it was sprayed golden and everyone had
that's
signed it. And it was so they kind of
that's so
like
big.
announced that, yeah, they announced that someone was getting an award, and then I got the award. I was
You
towed
got
the
the AMG
most.
Mercedes Tow Award.
Yeah.
Hey, not many people can brag about that, if
No, they
any.
can't. But wait, I'm not gonna skip away. What's the most interesting artist that you listen to in the car when driving?
Well, I have a range of artists
Okay,
that I
favorite
actually
song.
listen to.
If you wouldn't have to do the AMG experience again, but there has to be one song, and from beginning to end, it would be on repeat. What song would it be?
Hmm, that's a good question because my 24/7 song changes a little bit, but um it was actually the song that was playing while I was driving. I think it was Roses by Iman Beck. He's yeah, I like his songs. That one or Sunset Lover. That one would be a good one to have on 24/7. But now it's like I don't know, I have different variations. Sometimes
Sean,
I like a reggae song and I play that.
Jean-Luc just asking so he knows what to post next on his Facebook
Yeah,
feed because he's
I'm collecting data, and
so don't put too
after
much pressure on it.
tomorrow, if you see a post on Facebook and you're thinking, "Hey, this is a song I mentioned," then you know why.
Yeah, it was an experience.
But just to come back to the conversation, we're nearing the hour mark. There's so much more we can go into. We barely touched on some of the stuff you mentioned, but I think that's a nice place to end it with that award, the Toe Hook Award. Uh, Amazing experience, and I think anyone should be able to experience something like that. The way you described it with the sunset and ice, that combination of color, I can just imagine it in my head, like how soothing it should be, and
Hmm.
everything just disappears.
Yep.
But with that being said, like, what's Maya busy with now? How can people reach out to you if you want them to reach out to you, of course? And yeah, any final closing thoughts?
Well, we actually incorporated Daedalus Labs in Bermuda. So instead of having, we had AutoX, the name of the exchange, as the company name, whereas AutoX is actually just a product. So I hired a chief technical officer who worked at Rabobank for like 8 years. Is a whiz with tech, and also a maxi Bitcoiner, um, jury, and another who was actually head of UX, UI, marketing, and sales. A little bit mix of all. So, small bootstrap team. While we're raising CCAP, and we're actually signing partnership deals, negotiating right now, or in the midst of negotiations right now, and raising cap. And it's going very well. And we incorporated Daedalus Labs in Bermuda, which is the parent company. So Daedalus Labs it's a better, like, Daedalus was an architect, right? An innovator. Um, and in Greek mythology. So we picked Daedalus, and basically that is the company where it's our lab, where everything that we think of we create, and we actually flip the roadmap, because exchanges, like, there's no innovation really to be done or had for exchanges. And now the technology that I needed to build what I wanted to build is actually, we're at that point. So it's crazy how, even the difficulties I had with AutoX actually perfectly got me to where I need to be at this point. So we're building a real estate investment trust, using Bitcoin to replace mortgages,
That
but
is a
outside of Safe.
mouthful. I think most people won't understand it, but we are definitely looking forward to the evolution of it. Jean-Luc.
Thanks.
Yes, Maya, it was a pleasure to have you in Social Confoes. I think there's so many different layers that we haven't unpacked, but at least we got a little bit of a social conversation, starting off with growing up in a developing country and ending with crashing a Mercedes into the snow in Sweden. We want to thank you so much for joining us, and for everybody that tuned in and listened in. Thank you so much for tuning in to Social Confoes. We'll be back next week, same place, same time. Bye bye.